Mike Brown, the former FEMA director.
Joining us here is the former FEMA director.
History, I think, was very unkind to you, my friend. Very unkind.
Mr. Brown, thanks for being with us.
This is Michael Brown Unplugged.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged. You know, I have not talked a lot. In fact, I'm not sure I've talked hardly at all about the U.S. women's soccer team. Congratulations to them on winning the Women's World Cup or whatever they call it. And I haven't talked about it because, guess what? I just don't give a rat's ass. I just don't care. And in fact, I would venture to say I haven't seen any polling on it. I'm sure that Americans are proud that they've won. And I'm sure that, most Americans, if they were told that there is a women's soccer team, would go, well, that's great. I didn't know one existed. So I just haven't had much interest in it. But I keep seeing these stories over and over and over about Rapinoe. I can't remember what her first name is, but she's the one with the purple hair. She's the one that refused. She took a knee. She refused to salute the flag. I think she's also the one that at some point, dropped the American flag and a teammate ran up and picked up the flag. I mean, there are all of these things that all the talking heads keep going on and on and on about with regard to Rapinoe. But I just haven't cared until yesterday. And she was on CNN doing a one-on-one interview with Anderson Cooper when she said or made these comments.
To the White House.
There's a good chance the president is watching this interview or will watch this interview. What is your message to the president?
Oh, message to the president. I think that I would say that you're...
Now, I want to pause for just a moment because obviously in the podcast you don't have the benefit of watching what I'm playing for you right now. But Anderson Cooper says, I'm sure the president's watching this right now. And Anderson, I hate to tell you, but he may not be watching it. But Anderson says, or he may, someone may show it to him. But if you had a message for the president, what would it be? She literally turns to her, it would be to her right, and looks directly into the camera as if she were delivering a message to the president of the United States of America. That alone I found fascinating because it was, to a certain degree, a rhetorical question. Now, if the president were watching this, what would you want to say to the president? Most people are so they're not so narcissistic that they instantly think to themselves, "Oh, let me turn and look at the red light on the camera and let me talk directly to the president." Most people wouldn't do that. But she is so narcissistic that she thinks she's delivering a message to POTUS.
Message is excluding people. You're excluding me. You're excluding people that look like me. You're excluding people of color. You're excluding, Americans that maybe support you.
Wow. Oh, we still got about a minute and 40 seconds to go. Her message to the president would be, stop excluding people. You are excluding people that look like me. Now, let me just say this. She doesn't look, she's not necessarily attractive to me. She's not unattractive. She is stereotypical American. Some people might be offended by the fact that she has dyed her hair. She's got a Rachel Maddow haircut, and it is a little bit gray and a little bit purple, and it's like, so what? So what? And then she made the comment, you're even excluding people that may support you. Here's my question to you. How? No, I'm not asking her. She's going to try to explain it in a minute as best she can. No, I want to know from you. I want you to think, how is this president excluding anyone? When you think about, if we're going to think about this question in terms of economics, this economy is doing well for everybody, even those on the low end of the totem pole. Can you say totem pole? I just did. For even those on the low end of the totem pole, wages are increasing. Wages are up 4 or 5%. Unemployment is down across all demographics. How are we excluding people? Okay, so politically. Well, politics is, in essence, the politics of exclusion. On the one hand, you want to include as many people in your political tent, but then you also exclude people necessarily by the things that you stand for. If I stand for X and you're opposed to X, then in my political tent, you're not a part of my tribe. You're not a part of my group. You're not a part of what I stand for. So in terms of just social policy, there are no social policies in this country. And in fact, I would say that social policies, with the exception of Democrats' identity politics, social policy in this country is probably more inclusive than it has ever been in the history of any other civilization in the history of mankind. So when she says that you're even excluding people that support you, I, honest to goodness, don't have a clue what she's talking about. She continues.
I think that we need to have a reckoning with the message that you have and what you're saying about Make America Great Again. I think that you're harking back to an era that was not great for everyone. It might have been great for a few people, and maybe America is great for a few people right now, but it's not great for enough Americans in this world. And I think that we have a responsibility, each and every one of us. You have an incredible responsibility as, the chief of this country, to take care of every single person. And
whoa. All right. Well, there's a lot to unpack here. Let's start. Let's go back to, with your slogan of Make America Great Again, that you are hearkening back to a time when it wasn't necessarily great for everybody. I don't think that's what he means by Make America Great Again. I think, this is my own interpretation, maybe you have your own interpretation, but Make America Great Again, in my opinion, really harkens back to just the 8 years of the Obama administration. Now, for others, it may go back further, and maybe for some people it does go back to the days of Jim Crow. Maybe it does go back to the days of slavery. Maybe it does go back to lynchings in the South, but I don't really think so. When Donald Trump ran on the slogan of Make America Great Again, I think he was talking about improving the economy, unleashing the private sector to go out and be as successful as they can, unleashing the private sector for entrepreneurs to be as successful as possible. I think he was talking about America's role in the world, of no longer being pushovers, of no longer just getting involved in these endless wars that go on and on and on, but actually really taking care almost of a America first. And I know that the phrase America first comes tinged with if you understand Charles Lindbergh and kind of the America First movement, that phrase may come tinged with some ideas that maybe we don't accept. But honest to God, I really don't think that's what Donald Trump was thinking about. I think that he was thinking that Make America Great Again means that in all ways, we want to put America first. We want our values of liberty, freedom, individual freedom, the values that are embedded in the Constitution, that we want to bring those alive again for everybody, and that we want to make America the greatest that it can possibly be once again. We don't want to live with a stagnated economy. We don't want to live with the divisiveness of the ostensibly first black American president that really was going about trying to divide America. I think that's what he meant. Is this not, when she talks about hearkening back to Jim Crow era or a time when America maybe wasn't great for people like her? Well, who are people like her? People like her are an individual whose sexual orientation, I just don't care about her sexual orientation. But her sexual orientation is apparently the most important part of her being. Well, I hate to break the news to her, but we no longer live in a society where gay and lesbian people, and gosh, I hate to just say gay and lesbian people, because that apparently is exclusionary language, and that's probably a microaggression. And if I just offended one of you out there because you happen to love porcupines, well, you know what? Have at it. Love porcupines. I think that this is almost a projection. This is her projecting upon Donald Trump all of the ills that she sees in the world from her perspective. She doesn't realize that as a member of this championship team, and I often wonder whether she understood she was on a team or not, but she's projecting that somehow there's all of this discrimination in the world, and all of that discrimination is being visited upon her because, well, she has a Rachel Maddow haircut, and she dyes her hair purple, and she doesn't respect the American flag. She doesn't respect American institutions or American values. I kind of think that's what's really going on.
You need to do better for everyone.
Oh, that's right. I wanted to back this up. Because think about, is this the role of the President of the United States?
Responsibility, each and every one of us. You have an incredible responsibility as, the chief of this country to take care of every single person, and you need to do better for every.
The oath of office. I do solemnly swear that as President of the United States of America, I will do my best to take care of everybody in the country. That's you talk about nanny state, you talk about nannyism. If that's what she thinks the role of the government is to take care of everybody, man, have we failed miserably helping people or educating people about what the role of the federal government is. To take care of everybody. I would actually be, I want the government to do just a couple of basic things for me. I would have included the post office, but I really don't even care about the post office anymore. And I know I have postal carriers that listen to the podcast, that listen to the radio program. But if I truly, honestly, sincerely, desperately have to have it there, like this afternoon or tomorrow morning by 10 a.m., FedEx.
The idea of Make America Great Again, if it means going back to an America from the 40s or 50s, that's an America where you could be imprisoned for being gay, where you could be sent by your family to a mental hospital, where you could not walk down the street holding hands with your loved one, or I could not walk down the street or go dancing or anything. It's interesting how different people view things through a very personal lens. And as you said, maybe don't walk in the shoes of other people who, did not have rights in a past halcyon America.
Wow. So now I want to think that what Anderson Cooper is saying is, there was a time when homosexuality was, against the law, and that you could be shunned, you could be jailed, you could have been charged with a crime. Sodomy laws, and maybe in some states sodomy laws still exist on the books. I don't know. Guess what? I don't care. Nobody's enforcing them. Is Anderson Cooper trying to point out that maybe you're being a little absurd? Because I don't think there's anybody. Let me rephrase that. Because there's always somebody, right? There's always somebody on both ends of the political spectrum who want to take things to the most extreme. So maybe there are some bigots out there. And maybe there's some people that aren't necessarily bigots, but maybe they still believe that homosexuality is a sin. But, do they really want gays jailed? Do they want them thrown from rooftops like they do in Iran? No, I don't think so. I think Anderson, to a certain degree, was trying to point out, maybe you're being a little too absurd.
Yeah, it was not a great place for a lot of people. It was a very oppressive place. And that's not to say that it was the worst place in the world. I think that's one of the things that a lot of people go to. No one's saying that they want to leave America, but I think as one of the great countries in the world, and for sure we want to see ourselves as that. We need to constantly look within and challenge ourselves to be better so everyone else can be better around us.
Do you, I know you've been invited by...
And he went on to ask her about being invited to the White House. I don't care whether they go or don't go to the White House. This is why I could not care less about women's soccer. Because she doesn't realize that she's actually living. And you would think that the women's soccer team traveling around, of course, I guess primarily they just played their games in Europe. If she were to go to some S-hole countries, she might recognize that, yeah, it really is one of the greatest places on earth, if not the greatest place on earth. And that people are actually doing everything they can to get into this country. It's not the other way around. But what about the whole idea that the World Cup pay gap is wrong? Has anybody addressed that?
Every single member of the team is suing U.S. Soccer for paying them less than the men's team. They claim the only reason for that gap is institutionalized sexism. There's no doubt that the women's soccer team is better in their league than our men's team will probably ever be. The men's team didn't even qualify for the upcoming World Cup. But team performance is barely a factor when it comes to how much you get paid for playing your favorite sport. You can win as many hopscotch tournaments as you want, but big money only comes from viewership. So let's look at the industries we're talking about here. Pay scales for athletes are based on two factors. One, the total revenue for their sport, followed by performance.
Just managed to get the veteran Ter Stegen, who made a number of good saves in the second period. Messi!
Well, the 2015 Women's World Cup brought in $73 million worth of revenue. The players themselves got 13% of that revenue. The Men's World Cup in 2018 garnered $6 billion. So yes, men make more than women, but only because they bring in about 100 times more revenue in ticket sales, broadcasting, sponsors, and merchandise. That's why FIFA's prize pool for the men is $400 million and the women's is $30 million. But that's global revenue. Surely within the United States, women's soccer is more popular. Well, no. With the national teams, we can't really compare because broadcasting rights for the men's and women's teams are sold as one package, so we can't tell which the broadcasters want more. But there are professional soccer leagues within the US. The all-male Major League Soccer has existed since 1995 and generated enough money to stay afloat, and its viewership has only gone up.
The most ambitious coast-to-coast professional soccer league in American history.
And history is made today. ESPN presents the inaugural game of Major League Soccer.
But Americans just haven't been interested in a professional women's league. In 2001, there was the Women's United Soccer Association, but it went defunct in 2003. In 2007, they made women's professional soccer, but it died in 2012 and got replaced by the National Women's Soccer League, which still exists today, but again, let's look at viewership. The Women's League had a per-game average of 6,000 attendees in 2018. The Men's League averaged 22,000. The reality is that the US soccer program isn't sexist, it's just that men compete at a higher level, which means more people enjoy watching, which means higher revenue, which means higher pay.
Oh, you mean it's basic economics. So the men's team brings in more revenue, and so the athletes that play on the men's team get a proportionately larger share of that revenue, and women's soccer brings in a lower amount of revenue, and so consequently their share of the revenue is lower. Has nothing to do with women versus men. It has to do with viewership, sponsorship, the consumption of the product that they offer, and the product that they offer is consumed in greater numbers. Oh, that's right, supply and demand. But that's not how liberals think. They think solely in terms of sex. Well, I mean, they think in other terms too, but here they're thinking that women are getting paid less because they're women. And so what is the liberal solution to that? The liberal solution to that is to have some sort of, and I don't know who they're, are they going to have the federal government do it? But their solution is we must equalize this out. That's always the liberal solution. Find an external body, in this case, let's have the federal government, mandate that women and men's soccer players be paid correspondingly equal dollar amounts. That's the entire precept for me of liberalism. Just have the government or somebody come in and forcibly alter the marketplace so that everything gets equalized out. Nobody wants to live in a world like that. Everybody, in my opinion, should rise and fall on their own merit. But no, we don't really want to live in a meritocracy. I think there are too many people that want to live in an autocracy. Immigration is not just an American problem. Immigration, in particular uncontrolled immigration, is a problem that's faced by many European countries because of migrants moving in from Africa and moving in from the Middle East, just uncontrollable immigration. Well, the same is true for Mexico. The López Obrador administration has adopted an enforcement-first approach to migration, just as previous, Mexican administrations have done when they faced pressure from Washington. It's really a radical shift for a government that once wanted greater openness to Central American migrants. For all of his campaign talk of treating migrants differently than his predecessors did, the current Mexican president has become almost solely focused on enforcing Mexico's borders. Since the beginning of 2019, Mexico has detained and deported historically high numbers of people. In May alone, more than 23,000 migrants were apprehended and more than 15,000 deported. That is roughly twice the 10,000 apprehended and 8,000 deported in May of the previous year. Mexico has also sent, as you may recall, 6,000 National Guard members along with elements of its Army and Navy to the southern border, to the southern Mexican border, to back up its woefully underfunded migration authorities. But perhaps most notably, as part of a program that was kind of dubiously called the Migrant Protection Protocol, the MPP, the Mexican government has been readmitting Central Americans to wait in Mexico for their asylum hearings in the United States. That program began last December and is now being ramped up significantly. The Mexican government agreed to these measures back on June 7 as a way of avoiding the tariffs that Trump had been threatening. The two governments further agreed that if unauthorized migration does not drop in the first 45 days after the agreement was signed, they would start negotiations on a safe third country agreement. That would require asylum seekers to request asylum in the first country they cross into. What does that mean? That would make Mexico responsible for handling asylum applications from nationals of any other country that pass through Mexico first. Although I suppose it is possible that Guatemala and other countries might join such an agreement as well. I don't know what's going to happen, but I think this is somewhat of an indication. The Mexican finance minister, Carlos Urwe, has resigned. It's a surprise departure that has deepened doubts among investors over economic policy under President López Obrador, including fears that he may eventually undermine Mexico's financial stability. In a strongly worded resignation letter yesterday, Mr. Urwe cited, quote, many disagreements over economic policy, writing the administration was basing some economic decisions on extremist ideology. A person close to Mr. Urwe told the Wall Street Journal in a story that the former finance minister had disagreed with a number of government decisions, including one to cancel a partially built Mexico City airport, and that he has clashed with how the government was cutting spending in order to fund new social programs. You see, it's not just us. What Trump is doing in terms of the threatening of tariffs has probably resulted in the resignation of the finance minister, has resulted in additional personnel and policies regarding migrants coming into Mexico, not just from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, but migrants coming into Mexico from other asshole countries trying to make their way across Mexico to our southern border to seek asylum. The unintended consequences of what Trump is doing, now look, I'm opposed to tariffs, but if he's playing a long game here with tariffs, and that's having policy effects in Mexico, I'm willing to sit back and watch. There is a catfight going on in Congress, and I got to tell you, I love it. 6 months into the new House Democratic majority, long simmering tensions between the Speaker and the squad is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, and Ayanna S. Presley of Massachusetts. Those tensions have boiled over in the most public of ways, setting off a flurry of criticism of Mrs. Pelosi among those liberal activists and those progressives and those Marxists, and it's now reinvigorating a debate within the party about how to best stand up to President Trump. It couldn't come at a better time. The fire was lit by a $4.6 billion border aid package that was passed by Congress that the quartet argued had empowered President Trump's immigration crackdown. But the force already was a tinderbox, dried by the months-long debate over impeachment, earlier dust-ups with Ms. Omar and Ms. Tlaib over Ms. Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Deal, and looming debates over a $15 an hour minimum wage bill and funding for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. This squabble is all the more notable because what it does is it pits Nancy Pelosi, I would call the standard liberal San Francisco congresswoman, who is the most powerful elected woman in American history, against a group of Marxist Democratic women of color who have broken barriers of their own as part of the most diverse class to ever serve in the U.S. House of Representatives. This is an inevitable tension between a few Marxists with one priority, and that's their ideology, and a Speaker of the House that has many priorities, including preserving her majority in the House, electing a Democratic president against Trump, and responding to the consensus of her caucus. Now, according to Steve Israel, a Democrat and former representative of New York, that's the essence of the battle. And to the extent that it distracts from Donald Trump and becomes a circular firing squad among Democrats, it's going to be lethal. Pelosi, to her credit, is standing by her comments, and AOC is tweeting back. Here's how it was reported on Fox News' Brett Baer.
Going in the Democratic caucus up here on Capitol Hill, Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker, also telling the New York Times, quote, all these people have their public whatever and their Twitter world, but they didn't have any following. They're 4 people, and that's how many votes they got. Here's the 4 people, the progressives in there, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Tlaib, Omar, and Presley. There is a battle forming, and we're back with the panel. Susan, it's very public. It's not, they're not hiding this.
It's public, but this is a real mini faction. She's right when Leslie Stahl said, no, but it's a much bigger faction. No, it's not. It's this mini faction, and they are learning the limits of their social media stardom. There was this sort of outsized expectation. They would come to Congress with millions of people following them on Instagram and Twitter and be able to have this major influence on the people they vote with. But Congress is a much different animal. Winning votes is not retweets and likes. It's much harder. And they don't, someone like Pelosi, who is a master at understanding leverage, how the body works, what cooperation means, when it's necessary, all these things she's developed over the years. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has not developed any of those skills yet, and she doesn't have that kind of influence in Congress that she has on social media.
So compare or contrast the progressive wing, and not just these four, but there are others, of the House Democratic Caucus with the Tea Party of the Republicans that John Boehner tried to herd the cats and get votes to pass. I mean, is it much smaller? Is it much more not of a problem for Speaker Pelosi?
No, I disagree a little bit. Because it wasn't 4 votes. I think 90 Democrats who voted against that immigration? It certainly wasn't 4. It was a lot.
I think what they're talking about now is that past border bill.
I would just say I would not. I think I found that interview very curious, the Maureen Dowd interview. It was a strange scene with Nancy Pelosi with her purple Manolos.
You mean the Leslie Stahl?
No. The one that blew it. The one that's caused the New York Times interview.
If
you read it, munching on chocolate and sort of dismissing these people. I mean, they have a huge following, and I think if you look at the votes against this bill, it was a lot more than 4, and to say it was just 4 votes. So, yes, like they don't have an organised group like the Freedom Caucus, which was formed on the basis of being able to block legislation. So on that very basis, the comparison falls over. They haven't. And actually, the weird thing is they've been very deferential to leadership. They supported Pelosi when she was getting hit from the right. That's the weirdest thing about this. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and some of these other progressives actually supported her. Yeah. And for these comments, I mean,
well, it's public now.
It's a public battle, all right. And in an interview, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez made a comment that I just found strikingly naive and stupid. She wondered out loud in the interview, "Sometimes I wonder if they're trying to keep me busy." In other words, I've got all these committee assignments. I don't have time to go tweet. I don't have time to make these little junkets down to the southern border where I can do these fake photographs. I wonder if they're trying to keep me busy. No, it's called being a member of Congress. It's not your own little fiefdom. It's you actually have legislative work to do.
Pelosi, tell me how that works. What are the dynamics of it?
I think sometimes people think that we have this, we have a relationship.
Are you saying you don't?
Not particularly. Not one that's, I think, distinguished from anyone else. If there's a legislative need, the last time I kind of spoke to her one-on-one was when she asked me to join the Select Committee on Climate Change.
What did she say?
I said no.
Why?
Because I had made very specific requests, which I thought were rather reasonable. For the Select Committee on Climate Change, I asked that it have a mission to try to draft legislation by 2020 so that we essentially have a 2-year mission to put together, whether it's a Green New Deal or whether it's some sweeping climate change legislation, that the Select Committee have a legislative mission. I asked for it to have subpoena power, which most committees do. The last Select Committee had subpoena power, but now this one doesn't. And I asked for the members who sit on the Select Committee to not take any fossil fuel money. And none of those requests were accommodated, and so I didn't join the committee.
Oh, so you didn't get what you wanted, so you didn't join the committee. You can't always get what you want, sweetheart. No, 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 no. This woman, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I think in many ways embodies this millennial attitude that it's all about her. She should get anything and everything that she wants. There is no compromise. There is no negotiations. It's just my way or the highway. And I really, truly believe that she thinks that she is this little entity in and of herself, and that, again, she's not a member of a team. 435 members of the House. I forget what the split is between Democrats and Republicans. It's not important, but however many the Democrats number, that's her caucus. And she can stand and argue and make the debates and make the case for why she should get X, Y, and Z, whatever it is. But you're not going to get everything. And I think in that Brett Baer interview, the panel does correctly point out that Nancy Pelosi understands the nuances of the House. As much as I disagree with Nancy Pelosi's politics, and as much as I disagree with how she conducts the business of the House, I admire her for understanding the nuances of trying to get legislation through, of understanding what the long-term strategy is versus the short-term strategy. And Nancy Pelosi is right. You can come with millions of followers on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and anything else. That doesn't make a rat's ass difference. It only matters what your influence is in your congressional district and in what you can do within your caucus. Because those objectives are different. Yeah, you need to get elected every 2 years. You need to build up seniority. You need to build up influence. But if you have 1 million followers, but your congressional district still only represents about 600,000 people, that's the extent of your real influence right there. So you have to build a coalition, not just among your millions of followers, but among your other 435 members of the House.
You better on the outside looking in or the inside looking out?
I think I'm better on the outside looking in on this issue.
Why is that?
Because given that none of those standards were met, sitting on that committee, I would have to own anything. I would take responsibility for anything that comes out of that committee. And when the
so I don't want to have my fingerprints on anything that might come out of a committee where I didn't get everything that I want. Let me make a gigantic extrapolation here. I think that's how many people of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's age group, of her political persuasion, that's how they think. It's not about compromise. It's not about legislating. It is about getting everything that they want or nothing. It's an all or nothing game with them. And you know what? I'm fine with that. Because as long as they take that attitude, they'll continue to be marginalized. Oh, I don't want them to go away. I want them to stick around for as long as possible. But I do want them marginalized because I oppose their policies with every fiber of my being, because I believe that their policies and what they want for this country will lead to the downfall and will lead to the completion of the fundamental transformation of this nation. But they're great. They are great in terms of politics, because as long as they're standing out there, they're like an airport beacon. They're showing us exactly the direction that we're going if we allow them to have their way.
The actual, in my opinion, the structure of it is compromised in very deep ways. You know, it's not, I don't think it was like, I'm going to take my ball and go home.
Well, but that is precisely what you did.
Have a select committee whose mission I was uncertain on, whose members take fossil fuel money. You know, it's beyond just a mere disagreement. I think there's a structural problem with it. And so, and there's plenty of other caucuses as well that work on climate issues. So I think that ultimately I'm fine with the decision, especially given the committee assignments that I was ultimately given, which were very intense and very rigorous. I was assigned to 2 of some of the busiest committees and 4 subcommittees. So my hands are full. And sometimes I wonder if they're trying to keep me busy.
Well,
see, most people, I sincerely believe this. I think most people, if they got 4 major committee assignments, 4 of the busiest committees, and you're a freshman member of Congress, you should look around and go, holy crap, I can wield some influence. I'm on these 4 major committees. I'm going to be extremely busy, because the job of a congressman is not to tweet, is not to post to Instagram, is not necessarily to travel to the southern border for a fake photo opportunity, but is to actually do the business of the nation, is to actually do the business of the Article 1 branch of government, which is to legislate. Now, do I want them legislating all the time? No. I prefer that they hold hearings and that they call witnesses and they talk about stuff. Do all that all you want. The fewer laws you pass, the better off we are. So yeah, if she wonders if they're just trying to keep her busy, she ought to actually see that as an accolade and not as some sort of insult. But that's just how stupid she is. I haven't talked about the federal budget in a long time, but there's a news story out today that explains why we should be talking about it. For the very first time, in our nation's history, there is a federal department that is spending an average of more than $100 billion per month. And I know the first instinct is for everybody to think, well, yeah, it's national defense, where, the Pentagon is probably spending $100 billion per month. Oh, no. It is the Department of Health and Human Services, which, of course, if Democratic Senator Bernie Sanders, socialist of Vermont, has his way, will also take on the additional program of running the Medicare for All program. As it now stands, HHS already runs Medicare for many and Medicaid for even more. The Congressional Research Service said of Medicare in a report published in May, in 2019, the program will cover an estimated 61 million persons, 52 million aged, and 9 million disabled. Medicaid, of course, is the means-tested entitlement program that provides the delivery of primary and acute medical services as well as, I think, long-term services and to an estimated 75 million people at a cost to states and federal government of $616 billion in FY 2018. But the CBO also estimates that federal Medicare spending, after deduction of beneficiary premiums and other offsetting receipts, will still be about $637 billion in 2019. That accounts for about 14% of total federal spending, 14%, Medicare alone, and accounts for 3% of the gross domestic product. Two programs, Medicare and Medicaid, are expected to account for an estimated 86% of all Health and Human Services spending in FY 2019. In the first 8 months of this fiscal year, which began in October, Health and Human Services spent $834.346 billion. Through all of fiscal 2018, they spent $93.375 billion per month. Now they're estimating $1,230,273 billion, or about $102 billion per month. That's about $4.9 billion per day, $196.98 million per hour, or $3.28 million per minute. That's on a mandatory redistribution entitlement program and nothing to do with national defense. That's the direction the country's going. Whether we like it or not, and whether we elect a Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren or any of these other yahoos on the Democrat side in 2020, we're turning into a democratic socialist nation, whether we want to or not. That's just the reality. In bad news for the environment, I read a lot of tech journals and listen to tech podcasts, and one of the really lefty tech magazines that I read is Wired magazine. Well, as we know now, everything must be hyper-regulated to the point of total suppression because everything causes climate change. Apparently, even trees. According to Wired, Suntha Pangala, a British postdoc researcher, spent 2 months traveling the Amazon's waterways, strapping gas measuring equipment to thousands of trees. She found that trees, especially in the extensive flooded forests, were stimulating methane production in the waterlogged soils and mainlining that methane right into the atmosphere. Methane production, right there from the rainforest. Well, I guess we should just cut down the rainforest. Wired magazine continues, she discovered a hitherto ignored major source of the second most important greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. It now seems that most of the world's estimated 3 trillion trees emit methane at least some of the time. You know, the first most important greenhouse gas is not CO2, it's water vapor. But big government had better regulate that too, or the climate might continue to fluctuate, well, the way that it always has. You know, it's been known for at least a century that trees emit methane, but until now, nobody really thought to investigate how much in the context of all of this global warming hysteria. But meanwhile, the dumbasses lay the groundwork to ban meat because cows emit methane. Well, wait a minute. If cows emit methane, if methane is bad and methane is a proximate cause of global warming, shouldn't we ban trees also? But we learned that planting trees may not reduce greenhouse gases as much as we've been told. But more importantly, well, what this really tells us is climate science is still in its infancy. So at this point, it's too corrupted by political considerations to take it seriously anyway. Nobody knows what the climate's going to do. The only thing that I think we can be relatively sure of is that allowing lefties to exploit climate hysteria to impose repressive policies is unlikely to have a perceptible effect, much less a beneficial effect on the climate. Yeah, so the next time you hear about, the rainforest is being destroyed, you might think, well, isn't that a good thing? Because those rainforest trees are emitting methane. Yeah, forest farts. You may recall yesterday I mentioned that a court of appeals in Manhattan has ruled that Trump is unconstitutionally blocking people from his Twitter account if he does so based on viewpoint discrimination, which I find interesting because when you block somebody, you don't put a reason. If I decide to block you on Twitter, I just block you. I block you because I don't like your picture. I block you because you said something that I just think is stupid. There's no indication to the person who gets blocked, or there's no indication from me as to why I blocked you. But nonetheless, the court ruled that even though the president's Twitter account is his personal account that he's been using since long before he even ran for president, that he cannot block people based upon viewpoint discrimination. Well, Jimmy Kimmel had some fun with that.
Flag, but the world's most famous cyberbully, Donald Trump, I don't know if you heard, suffered a legal setback today. A federal appeals court this morning ruled that the president of the United States cannot block his critics on Twitter. He has to open his account to everyone. It's historic because this is the first time a federal court has ever ruled that a president's skin is legally too thin. Trump, as you probably know, has blocked a lot of accounts, including Stephen King, Chrissy Teigen, and Rosie O'Donnell, all of which he had to unblock because of this case. A spokesman for the Justice Department said they're disappointed in the decision. They're exploring possible next steps, seems like a good use of time. Maybe he can get the crowd at his next rally to chant "block her up" and get this really going. The president was up bright and early, rubbishing one of his critics today, the British ambassador to the United States. Trump is upset because the ambassador sent what were supposed to be secret government cables to England.
And, of course, that ambassador has apologized and resigned. But to go back to the Twitter case for a second. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a public figure, an elected official, member of the United States Congress, has been blocking people. I said yesterday that I thought that this case about Trump's Twitter account would have a lot of unintended consequences that we would start discovering over time. I think we have found the first one. Apparently, AOC blocked a candidate that is running against her in her congressional district. Well, wait a minute. If Trump is forced to unblock people, wouldn't the same rationale apply to a congressperson, to AOC? I can't wait to see how this plays out. Mark my words. This is going to go down a path that even Twitter's not going to like, because the idea that a court can tell you who you can and cannot block, regardless of the reason why you block somebody, is going to have a lot of ramifications that we can only begin to imagine. Oh, get me some popcorn, baby. Get me some popcorn. Beto O'Rourke is in the news, which for him is the best news he's had all day. Robert Francis O'Rourke, the Irishman that pretends to be the Mexican, apparently was at some sort of conference and made, again, just one of the dumbest. I guess the dumber the statement is, the more likelihood that if you're running at 1% of the polls among 2023, and now you got Tom Steyer running for president, you're going to say and do anything to try to get attention. Well, he is.
This country was founded on white supremacy, and every single institution and structure that we have in our country still reflects the legacy of slavery and segregation and Jim Crow and suppression, even in our democracy.
Of course, the word democracy makes me shudder, but this country was founded on white supremacy, and every single institution, every single structure that we have in this country still reflects the legacy of slavery and segregation and Jim Crow and suppression, even in our democracy. Holy cow. They've just gone off the deep end. They've truly just gone off the deep end. And I know that, he gets his arms flailing, and who knows, sometimes I think they don't even know what they're saying. They just have this word salad. They have all of these buzzwords that pollsters and their consultants have crammed into their brains. And so they sit down, and the answer to every question, they just pick out words out of that word salad. It's like a spinner salad thing that you'd buy from Rontel, at 2:00 in the morning on some infomercial, and it just spits out words. This country was founded on white supremacy. Every single institution. Okay, so the courts, the Congress, the executive branch, our churches, our education, our charitable organizations, every institution, every structure reflects the legacy of slavery and segregation and Jim Crow and suppression. Every single one of those. So here's the thought experiment. As you go about your day, having listened to this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged, every time you see an institution, government, non-government, any institution, a school, a church, a synagogue, a mosque, a tabernacle, whatever it might be, I want you to think about that institution, and I want you to, in your mind, tie it back to white supremacy, tie it back to segregation, tie it back to Jim Crow, tie it back to suppression. And then you'll understand the mindset of every yahoo running for president on the Democrat side. I love this one.
This country was founded on white supremacy, and every single institution and structure that we have in our country still reflects the legacy of slavery and segregation and Jim Crow and suppression, even in our democracy.
Oh, good grief. We are the dumbing down of America is really it's just gung-ho. We are just dumbing ourselves down as fast as we can. News 12, CNN, Commack, New York, reports that a worker at a New York chocolate and candy factory jokes that he's never going to eat chocolate again because he fell into a 20,000-pound tank of the sweet stuff, injuring his arm. First responders received a call about an industrial mixer accident Tuesday afternoon at Simply Natural Foods, which makes Simply Light chocolate bars and other candies. When we saw it come through, we saw industrial mixer, and I think all of us did an eye scratch, kind of wondering what was happening. The EMTs arrived to find a 37-year-old employee lying on the ground covered in chocolate. It looked a lot like regular chocolate, like liquid chocolate. If you would imagine melting down a chocolate bar, it was that consistency. The employees say that he fell into a 20,000-pound tank of chocolate while working. He had gone in to try to freeze something to operate the machine. It was in between mixing, and somehow the machine was still on and became entangled. Oh, there's a lawsuit there. Yeah, it's kind of funny, but there's a lawsuit there. If you use Uber like I do occasionally, you'll notice that you can rate the drivers. You rate them on, their friendliness, the cleanliness of the car, the speed of the service, the ability to follow directions to get you there quickly and efficiently. But the drivers can also rate you as a passenger. Now, I think the highest rating that you can get is a 5, and I think my rating is like a 4.8 or a 4.9. So I don't know, maybe it was sometime maybe I farted in a car or something, and so somebody gave me a 4.2 or something, and it brought my average down from a 5.0. Albuquerque, New Mexico, KOAT Television.
Guns drawn, they quickly see a man is on the ground next to the car. They call paramedics, then talk to the Uber driver, who is now in the back of a patrol car.
Yeah, 6'2" in the back of a Charger.
Police ask the driver, Clayton Benedict, if he's okay.
Are you injured at all? No, sir.
Investigators say Benedict was driving 2 passengers across town when one of them threw up. Police reports in the case say Benedict told passenger James Porter there would be a cleanup fee because his buddy vomited. Benedict and Porter argued. Then Benedict pulled over on the side of the freeway and told the passengers, get out. The Uber driver told officers he pulled out his gun after Porter threw his shoes and sunglasses at him, then threatened to take the car and run over Benedict.
Did you see anybody fire the gun? I am the one who discharged fire. Okay, so there's no other guns involved? No.
At one point during the investigation, officers have another man in the back of a police car. He's wearing a St. Paddy's Day necklace. Another video shows the Uber driver, now in white police coveralls, getting out of a patrol car and walking away.
I think this Uber driver might be in trouble. Yeah, I get that vomiting in the back of your car is irritating, and having somebody throw a shoe at you is irritating. But, you remember George Bush was I think he was in Baghdad, when a Iraqi news guy stood up and started throwing his shoes, which is a real serious insult in Muslim countries. And Bush was able to dodge the shoe. I don't think, in fact, as I play that scene over in my mind, I think the Secret Service maybe slowly approached, but it wasn't like the Secret Service jumped and pulled Bush down as the shoe came flying through the air. They recognized there was a shoe being thrown, and, a shoe is a shoe. I think this Uber driver is probably going to be in trouble. I don't think this is a justified shooting. But the lesson to be learned is, if you don't want to end up as a dead Uber passenger, 2 things. Don't vomit in the back seat of the car. 2, don't then get ticked off when the Uber driver gets mad and tells you to clean up the mess and take your shoes off and throw your shoes at the Uber driver. At least offer to take the car to get it cleaned up. Good grief. People are stupid. Let's get a taxpayer relief shot in. This comes to us from Corpus Christi, Texas.
Shooting on the city's south side rattled neighbors' nerves in the area. Police say an off-duty DPS trooper opened fire on a man who was attempting to break into his vehicle this morning. Stephen Cavazos was there, has more on the ongoing investigation.
A quiet scene here off Club Gate Drive, very different from earlier today when police arrived here to investigate a fatal shooting. This all starting just before 1:30 this morning. According to police, a homeowner who we've learned was an off-duty DPS trooper was alerted by his security system from a disturbance in his driveway. When he stepped outside, he saw a man attempting to break into his vehicle. Police say that's when an altercation took place, leading the homeowner to fire shots at that man. We're told that he did remain on the scene with the suspect, even providing first aid. The suspect was later transported to a nearby hospital where he died from his injuries. Now again, this investigation is ongoing, but neighbors are expressing their concern. We spoke with one woman who asked us not to show her face. She shares her reaction.
I was watching television and when I suddenly heard 4 what appeared to be shots. It's like you're a prisoner at your own home sometimes, because everything has to be locked, because you never know who's going to come around, who's going to knock at your door, who's going to try to break into your vehicle.
And Texas troopers did assist with this investigation, which, again, we're told is ongoing. No identities have been released, but you can stay with KIII 3 News. We'll bring you the very latest. For now, reporting here on the south side of town, Stephen Cavazos, 3 News.
Yep, that's 3 News. And they'll tell you right now, or at least I'll tell you right now, if you're going to try to steal a car, maybe you ought to try to figure out that it is not wise to steal an off-duty cop's car. Just a friendly suggestion to all the thugs that might be listening to Michael Brown Unplugged. Thanks for listening to this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged. You know the drill. iTunes, the iHeart app. Leave us a 5-star review. Leave us a review if you have time. Follow us on social media, michaelbrowntoday.com. That's all you have to do is just go to michaelbrowntoday.com. And I really would appreciate it if you, because I also post the podcast on YouTube so that you can listen to it at work if you want to do that. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You can do all of those things at michaelbrowntoday.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.